Embryo transfer is the last step in an IVF cycle, but certainly not the least. Embryo transfer is a very important step. It's a very important procedure, and the most important decision is how many embryos should we transfer. Now there is a misconception that transferring more embryos is always better, but it certainly doesn't work like that. Transferring more embryos doesn't guarantee that the patient will get pregnant. On the contrary, we should try to freeze some embryos for the patient in case if the cycle doesn't click. Of course, we want the patient to get pregnant in the first cycle itself, but in case if the patient doesn't get pregnant, she should always have some embryos frozen which will act as backup for her so that she can come back for a second cycle. Now it is always better to do blastocyst culture. It is always better to culture the embryos for 5 days, let them convert into blastocyst and then select the best embryos for the transfer on day 5. This way we will filter out the embryos which are not good, because some embryos will stop growing, they'll get stuck at some stage in the middle, and then we'll have some good ones on day 5 from which we can choose the best ones for the transfer. Now we recommend transferring only single blastocyst. The reason for that is if the patient has top quality blastocyst on day 5, then transferring that top quality blastocyst is more than enough. Transferring an additional embryo usually doesn't help, because if the patient doesn't get pregnant in that cycle, she'll lose both the embryos. So it's always better to transfer single blastocyst and freeze the remaining ones which are good. So if the patient doesn't get pregnant in that cycle, she can always use the frozen embryos in the next cycle. And if the patient gets pregnant, she can always come back for a second child. So it is always better to transfer on day 5 at blastocyst stage, and our advice is to transfer only single blastocyst.